Greetings, friends and brethren. This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Continuing Church of God. And this is the first regular service other than opening night for the Feast of Tabernacles in 2020 for the Continuing Church of God. I'd like to start off with a scripture that you rarely hear the first read at the Feast of Tabernacles. It's going to be from the Book of Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy chapter 31. And I'm going to start in verse 24. Give you a moment to get there if you like. I'll be using the New King James Version of the Bible today. Not because it's perfect, but because it uses modern English that most people who speak English will understand. Starting verse 24. So it was when Moses completed writing the words of this law in a book, when they were finished, then Moses commanded the Levites who bore the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, saying, take this book of the law, he's talking about the book of Deuteronomy, and put it inside the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, or eternal your God, that it may be there's a witness against you. And I know your rebellion, your stiff-necked. If today, while I was yet alive, you've not been rebellious, what's going to happen after I die? So Moses was warning people that they obeyed in his presence. And in a sense, for those who were in the old worldwide Church of God, we saw a lot of people stuck together when Herbert W. Armstrong was alive. And, people are not supposed to be in a church because of the strength of somebody's personality, including mine. All right? But Moses knew that was going to happen. The Apostle Paul wrote the same thing was going to happen too. Anyway, now I want to go a few verses up. Verse 9, Deuteronomy chapter 31. It says, so Moses wrote this law and delivered it to the priests, sons of Levi, who bore the Ark of the Covenant, and to all the elders of Israel. And Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, at the appointed time, in the year of release, at the Feast of Tabernacles, when all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God, in our time, spiritual Israel, in the place which he chooses, you shall read this law before all Israel in their hearings. Gather the people together, men and women and little ones. We have some little ones here. We had more of them last night. And the strangers within your gates, that they may hear, and they may also learn to fear the eternal Lord your God, and carefully observe all the words of this law, and that your children, who've not known it, may hear it, and learn to fear the Lord your God as long as you live in the land which you cross Jordan to possess. What land are we supposed to possess? We're supposed to be given the kingdom of God. It's one of the things the Feast of Tabernacles pictures. So, without further ado, we're going to go to the book of Deuteronomy. We're already in it, but we're going to go to the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy. And it's our intent to cover this book this year because it's been 7 years. Reading those passages in Deuteronomy when I was in the old Worldwide Church of God and the other groups I was in, I kind of wondered, how come we don't do this? We keep the Feast of Tabernacles, but I've been attending the feast since 1977, and I'd never heard it done. There's somebody who's with us who is in the quarantine right now, the little quarantine we have. And he and I were talking about this, and he said in this other church he was part of, it was a Church of God, I won't mention which one of the ministers asked their council or leaders, why don't we do this? We should do this, shouldn't we? And they wouldn't give him an answer. They just said, we don't do it. Okay? In my own case, back in 2006, I got a phone call, asked me to give a couple of sermons at the Feast of Tabernacles. And I'd never done that before. I'd given sermonettes but never sermons. So I thought about it and said, this would be a time for me to perhaps try to do this. So I told them, here's the two sermon subjects. One's going to have to do with the millennium, and the other one is I'm going to try to cover the book of Deuteronomy, because it says to do it. Now the person I talked to, and I won't mention his name, he's still there, he didn't have any problem with it. Now, maybe if he asked others, maybe they wouldn't have wanted it done. But I did do it. And as it turns out, I was wondering how it would be done 7 years later. I was not intending to leave my prior organization, but it ended up working out that way, that 7 years later, the Continuing Church of God held its first feast with that name, and we were able to cover the Book of the Law then. And this particular year, we've given instructions for people at all of our festival sites throughout the world. This will be in Africa, North America, Asia, Europe. In Australia and New Zealand, I think they're going to be watching these, so they won't be actually doing it, but they'll watch it being done. I think that's most parts of the world. I don't think we'll have it translated into Spanish this year, but perhaps we will do so in the future. But that's our intent, to cover this at all of our festival sites. So without further ado, we'll go to Deuteronomy, first chapter. We'll start in verse 1. These are the words which Moses spoke to all Israel on this side of the Jordan, in the wilderness, in the plains opposite Suph, between Paran, Tophet, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab. Now let me just comment, anytime I read any of these names, one, I'm going to apologize because I don't really know how they're pronounced, and two, nor does anybody else. Okay? They don't know because we didn't have, as far as we can tell, they did not have vowels when this was done. Now there's some people who argue that there were vowels back then, but Moses wrote this. Now a lot of secular scholars don't believe Moses wrote this. Moses wrote this using, they think, something called pre-Phoenician or Proto-Hebrew, which sort of had something to do with hieroglyphics. And this particular book was edited, we believe, by Ezra to try to put it into modern language. Because by the time of Ezra, people were not doing Phoenician, and they weren't doing Proto-Hebrew. So he was kind of the editor. Kind of like if we had an older version of the old King James Version of the Bible, and we needed to translate it. And by the way, those who have King James Version of the Bible, and he thinks it's exactly how God inspired it to be translated, which a lot of people claim, they don't realize that the modern King James Version of the Bible doesn't look like the old one. Matter of fact, I should have brought a copy. Somebody actually sent me a few pages of the King James Bible from before 1650, and they use F's instead of S's and certain other things that we're just not comfortable with. So Ezra kind of did something like that. He kind of edited that to make it so people could actually read it. Because, again, if we were to put out a writing and use F's instead of S's, people would think, what language is that? So anyway, that's what we believe happened with this. And that's why some of the things, particularly toward the end, when you see that Moses is dead, we don't believe Moses wrote that. Now, we do believe that Moses wrote what Jesus said he wrote, which includes this book. But again, he didn't write that he died, and we're pretty sure Ezra or somebody, one of the scribes who was trained in that version of Hebrew at the time, edited it a little bit. All right, and again, forgive my mispronunciations, but again, nobody really knows how these things were actually pronounced. It includes, by the way, when you see the word Lord, which either people say it's pronounced Yahweh, Jehovah, or various other versions of it. No one is certain, because the Jews wouldn't pronounce it. Okay? All right, having said that, verse 2. It's an 11 days journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir over to Kadesh Barnea. Now it came to pass in the 40th year of the 11th month, on the first day of the month, that Moses spoke to the children of Israel according to all the Lord had given him as commanded to them. So Moses is saying the words God told him to say. This happens after he killed Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, who dwelt in Astra and Eden. And on this side of the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses began to explain this law. So we see Moses decided, or God had Moses give a bit more of an explanation of the law. Verse 6. The Lord our God spoke to us in Horeb, saying, "You've dwelt long enough on this side of the mountain. Turn and take your journey, and go to the mountains of the Amorites, to all the neighboring places in the plain, in the mountains, in the lowland, in the south, and on the seacoast, in the land of the Canaanites, and Lebanon, and as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. See, I've set the land before you. Go in to possess the land which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, to give them and their descendants after them." As I mentioned before, the Feast of Tabernacles pictures a time when we will be in that promised land. This is a foretaste of the kingdom of God. Since I mentioned Herbert Armstrong before, let me just make a comment or two. Occasionally I've heard or read things like, Herbert Armstrong made all this stuff up, early Christians didn't believe any of this stuff, blah, 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 blah. And as one who's studied a lot of church history, let me assure you that early Christians absolutely kept the Feast of Tabernacles. Everybody knows that the bishops or pastors of Jerusalem did up until around 134, 135 AD before compromise struck there. And you were not allowed to be in Jerusalem if you kept the Sabbath and did not eat unclean meats. Okay, that's why it stopped there. That doesn't mean the descendants quit doing it, but the people who came in, they were ones who compromised. And furthermore, about the Feast of Tabernacles picturing the millennium, if you go throughout church history, you'll find bits and pieces. Church of God people said that's what it did. Even the major doctor of the church, the Roman Catholic Church, Jerome, the one who Pope Francis actually wrote a long thing about a week ago in his honor, he said, yeah, there's these Nazarene Christians, these people who go to church on Saturday, they don't eat unclean meat, they believe the Old Testament and the New Testament, they keep the Feast of Tabernacles, and they say it's got to do with the millennium. And that's the part of the promise for God's people these days. So again, when you read some of the stuff about them going into the promised land, theirs is just a physical type. Ours is more the fulfillment of what this is going to be. Okay, verse 9. And I spoke to you at that time, saying, I alone am not able to bear you. And this is Moses saying, because too many people, it's too hard for him. That the Lord your God has multiplied you, and here you are today, as the stars of heaven in multitude. May the Lord your God of your fathers make you as 1,000 times more numerous than you are, and bless you as he promised you. Let me just stop here for a moment. In most Bibles, you see the word Lord capitalized. Again, that's the Yahweh term. And the Jews were using the term Lord by prior to Jesus' time. They had a translation of the Old Testament called the Septuagint, and they decided to use the word Lord instead of Yahweh. So that's part of where this came from. Now, I think they should have put YHVH down there myself, but when we look in the New Testament, however, we don't see them using that term. So Jesus' time, he and his disciples were apparently comfortable using the term Lord, because that's what we see in the New Testament. And the New Testament, by the way, was written in Greek. We have a sermon on that if you want more information about that. Anyway, verse 12. How can I alone bear your problems, your burdens, and your complaints? Choose wise and understanding and eligible men from among your tribes, and I'll make them heads over you. And you answered me and say, the thing which you've told us to do is good. So I took the heads of your tribes, wise and eligible men, and made them heads over you, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50s, leaders of 10s, and officers for your tribes. Then I commanded that your judges at that time, saying, hear the cases between your brethren, and judge righteously between man and a brother, for the strangers within you. You shall not show partiality in judgment. You shall hear the small as well as the great. You shall not be afraid of any man's presence. Like, I can't rule against the president, the vice president, the Speaker of the House. Supreme Court justice or whatever. For the judgment is God's. The case that's too hard for you, bring it to me, and I'll hear it. Also, by the way, it wasn't supposed to matter how good of an attorney somebody had. You know, in the United States, we try to pretend justice is blind. It doesn't work out that way. There's all kinds of biases in prosecution. The only one I'm going to comment on at this instant has to do with money. Apparently, if you've got enough money with our way our legal system is supposed to work, you seem to be able to hire a lawyer who can confuse things enough, you can get away with just about anything. But if you don't have such, you're more often to get put to jail, even if you're not guilty. So, but it's not supposed to be that way. You're not supposed to be partial toward the poor or the rich, the great or somebody you think is really beneath you. You're supposed to be judged based on righteousness. All of God's commandments are righteousness. You're supposed to do it based on what's right and wrong, not is this an impressive person? Is this a smart person? Is this person a leader? Is this person you're a servant? Is this person somebody's slave? Is this person whatever? It wasn't supposed to be done that way. Anyway, verse 19. So we departed from Horeb, and we went through all that great and terrible wilderness, which you saw on the way, mountains of the Amorites. Let me stop right here. In the continuing Church of God, we do believe that God is going to protect the Philadelphians to get through the end time persecution before the beast fully rises up into a place of wilderness, a place of protection in the wilderness, often called the place of safety. Now, what's interesting about these people is they complained when they went through the wilderness. They'd been slaves. They were not treated very well. What happens when we're going to have to go to a place? Oh, we might take airplanes to get some part of it. Maybe. The Bible doesn't say. It doesn't talk about wings of an eagle. It said the children of Israel went on eagle's wings and they walked. So we might do a little bit of combination. But anyway, they went through the wilderness. And I'll get to some more about that later. It says, as the Lord our God had commanded us, and we came to Kadesh Barnea. By the way, some people think that Kadesh Barnea has to do with a place called Petra. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It's interesting when you look at the ancient maps, and I've got different ones, different Bibles, and I looked at ones. You got different cities, it's the same city, different places, and different maps. So don't be convinced that whatever you've got necessarily is correct, because a lot of times they don't really know. Now, it's true, as we get more archaeological evidence about various things, we know more of the truth. But also, we're in a society, in a world that's more and more secular. We get this magazine every now and then, and can't remember the name of it. It's an archaeological magazine. And the people who put it out, it's basically a Protestant organization. They take great exception to a particular Israeli researcher who I won't mention by name, but I know his name, because he doesn't believe the Bible at all. He doesn't believe the Old Testament at all. So he sees something, he tries to explain why it doesn't have anything to do with the Old Testament. But these other archaeologists say, wait a second, he missed this, he missed this, he missed this. It really doesn't have to do with it. And we are facing that type of a bias these days, more so than we did decades ago. So actually some of the books that came out 100 years ago, 150 years ago, even though we don't agree with these people's theology, a lot of them were trying to at least be sincere with what they knew. All right. So going back to verse 20, I said, you've come to the mountains of the Amorites, which the Lord your God has given us. Look, the Lord your God has set the land before you. Go up and possess it, as the Lord your God of your fathers has spoken to you. Don't fear or be discouraged. And as I said before, I'm glad that you're not fearful to keep the Feast of Tabernacles and to come. And to every one of you came near to me and said, let's send men before us, let them search out the land for us, and bring back the word to us, the way which we should go up in the cities to which we shall come. And Moses said, the plan pleased me well. Now, we don't know if Moses prayed to God about this or not. But he thought it was a good idea. So he took 12 men, 12 of your men, one from each of the tribe. They departed, they went up the mountains, they came upon the valley of Eshcol, and they spied it out. They also took some of the fruit of the land, and they brought it down to us. They brought it back to us, saying, indeed, it's a good land, which the Lord your God is giving us. We know the millennial kingdom will be good, and God will make it that way. So He has not appointed 12 of us to go out in the future and bring it back. But He did inspire people to write about it, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. So Moses said, after you guys said how great this stuff was, He says, nevertheless, you wouldn't go up, but you rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. And people these days say, well, we're Christian, we believe in the New Testament, we don't rebel against it. I'm not going to read, at least I'm not today, Revelation chapter 3. But you see 3 different groups of Christians mentioned, and only one of the 3 groups of Christians at the end time is actually doing what God commanded. Well, the other ones think they are, but they're not. Anyway, verse 27, and you complained. You complained to me in your tents, said, because the Lord hates us. He brought us out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us. Now, they were slaves. They were not treated well. Okay? They were not treated well. Remember, Pharaoh had a bunch of their babies thrown in the river too. They were not treated well. Yeah, but they didn't like how things went. You know, we've got some people who God's calling now, and it's like, wait, this is too hard. You're not treating me well. If God's calling you now, it says in Philippians, he who begun to good work in you will complete it. Okay, I'm going to 1 Corinthians, by the way. Where's the 2 Corinthians? I wrote it down here. Yeah, 1 Corinthians chapter 10. If we're faithful, God will not forsake us. He will not give up on us. But yes, we may have tests and trials. They ended up having to go to the wilderness for 40 years because of this. They weren't happy with it. Some of us have had various trials that have lasted at least 40 years as well. Except for those who are younger than 40, I'm pretty sure that's not possible, but for some of the others, or maybe just a few weeks, or maybe both. You have some that happened yesterday, and others 40, 50 years ago, I don't know. Let's go to verse 6 of 1 Corinthians 10. Now let's go to verse 5. But with most of them, God was not well pleased. Let's talk to these people we were talking about a moment ago. For their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now, these things just happened for historical reasons. It doesn't matter at all. No, that's not what it says. Verse 6. Now these things became our examples, to the intent we should not lust after evil things they also lusted. Don't become idolaters of some of them. You got people who are not comfortable with the Church of God because we don't have pictures of Jesus or crosses and this kind of stuff. So the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Nor commit sexual immorality, as some of them did. And what we've got a situation these days isn't so much that Church of God people are necessarily being involved in sexual immorality, at least I hope not, but tolerating certain things that the Bible says not to tolerate. By the way, that does not mean we're supposed to go up to people outside the church and tell them they're wrong for their sinful lifestyles. But we're not supposed to approve them either. Verse 9, nor let us tempt Christ as some of them also tempted. They tempted Christ. They didn't think they were tempting Christ. They thought Moses was a jerk, or he was just too important. He thought too much of himself. Paul, right, they were tempting Christ. And they were destroyed by serpents. Nor complain, as some has also complained, and were destroyed by the destroyer. Be careful about your complaints. Verse 11. Now all these things happened to them as examples, as they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. And we are a lot closer to the ends of the ages than when Paul was inspired to write this over 1900 years ago. It's one of the reasons these things are still relevant today. But you've got certain professing Christian types, particularly amongst Protestants, who consider most of that stuff's all done away, it's all irrelevant. On the Roman Catholic side, by the way, it's interesting. They actually say parts of it are relevant, but most of the parts they don't want to accept. But the early writings, interestingly, from Roman Catholic saints, say that, yeah, you're supposed to do the Old Testament as well, even though they started to change their mind when they switched Passover from the 14th to a Sunday. They started eating unclean meats, and did some other things. They started to make a bunch of changes there. All right. I should have held my place, and now I've got to figure out what verse I'm at here. It's complaining. Okay. Verse 28. Where can we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our hearts, saying, the people are greater and taller than we are. Okay, there's a lot more of them than there are of us. They're bigger. We need to be afraid because people are bigger. You know, when David had to face Goliath, Goliath was a lot bigger than David. Okay? He did it. He had the faith. People are greater and taller than us. Their cities are great and fortified up to the heavens. Wow, we can't go up there. Man, they're just prepared. Remember, we've seen the sons of Anakim there. And some think that's because these were even taller people. Then I said to you, do not be terrified or afraid of them. We are going to be facing various persecutions. Do not be terrified or afraid because we're going to have to. Verse 30, the Lord your God who goes before you, he will fight for you according to all he did for you in Egypt and before your eyes. Now you say, well, I didn't see God strike down firstborn with plagues. You need to have faith. Your own conversion is a bigger deal than you probably think. Anyway, it's a miracle. Verse 31, in the wilderness, you saw the Lord your God carried you as a man carried his son, and all the way you went until you came to this place. Moses says, you guys complained, but God still brought you through it. Jesus said, he who endures to the end, including women, by the way, will be saved. And these people, they kept complaining, but God kept bringing them along. They got there. They kept saying they weren't going to make it. Yet for all that, you didn't believe the Lord your God. You know, I know what it's like in the real world. One of the jokes I tell people is just because I have a PhD does not mean I don't live in the real world. I'll tell people in our office, I say, our children went to the local high school, etc. We know what it's like to actually live. And why am I telling you that? Because I know what it's like to say, well, yeah, I saw God do this, but that was a while ago. God, you really need to do this. Now would be really a great time for that. It doesn't always work that way. Now, interestingly, I will digress. There are 3 of you who are here today who all told me this week that various prayers for you all came to pass, which is very good, which is also helpful for all of you to make it here. So I'm very, very grateful for it. But if God doesn't immediately answer a prayer similar to that next week or the week after, will you get discouraged? Maybe. Could I get discouraged? Yes. Do I want to be? No. But my point is, we all get discouraged from time to time. Okay? Don't think just because someone's up here speaking, they never get discouraged. Or never have problems or tests or trials or anything along those lines. Moses wasn't happy with a lot of stuff he went through. He kept complaining he didn't want the job. Which, as several of you know, anytime I can get somebody to speak instead of me, I usually defer. But I can get away with that. All right? Moses was discouraged from time to time, but he didn't give up. He probably felt like it a bunch of times, but he didn't give up. And don't think he's Moses and you're you, and he was so much greater than you. When the Bible says many of the first will be last and the last first, you actually should be Moses' boss. You may not be, but you may say, well, I'm not a great speaker. I didn't write the books of the Bible. I didn't perform any great miracles. All I did was raise some kids on a barely survivable budget, or whatever else you might have had to go through. All I did is go to work and show up like I'm supposed to, but God looks on the inside, and he doesn't judge it the way other people do. As a matter of fact, I mentioned David. You had God's guy there, Samuel. Said, to Jesse, bring your kids by. Oops. Tallest kid comes first. Samuel, look at this guy. Looks like a good one who would be the king. God says, no. You're looking on the outside, I look in your heart. I don't know your heart, God does. So don't be discouraged because you've been facing some health problem for a long time, or job problem for a long time. One of the things I tell people professionally is one thing I've learned is almost everybody has personal problems, relationship problems, financial problems, school problems, work problems, extended family problems, etc. And the Bible's clear that we all have to face various tests and trials. Now, I know very well about some of the ones some of you are facing, which I think are extreme and difficult. Have faith. Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow, take it a day at a time. I know that's very easy to say and harder to do when you're in pain or suffering or things are going wrong. These people were supposed to look for the promised land. They got discouraged, so they ended up dying in the wilderness, and their kids ended up going into it. If you don't give up, even if you do die, you will be resurrected to be part of that millennial kingdom, to be kings and priests. It doesn't matter how you were brought up. It doesn't matter if you're male, female. It doesn't matter ethnicity. It doesn't matter what country you're born in. None of that makes any difference. God has a plan. Okay, let's see. I was going to say, it's in verse 32. It says, after everything God did, they didn't believe God. Verse 33. Who went up before your way to search out the place to pitch your tents, to show you the way which you should go, fire by night and a cloud by day. God's already done this for us, but in a different way. The millennial kingdom, you don't think God's already got this planned out? There's a plan for you? You're not an afterthought, by the way. He knew you before the foundation of the earth. He's had a plan for you the whole time, and he still does. Verse 34. The Lord heard the sound of your words and was angry at you and took an oath, saying, surely not one of the men of this evil generation who are going to see that good land which I swore to their fathers, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, will see it. And him and his children, I'm going to give them the land which he walked, because they wholly followed the Lord. Hopefully you're wholly following God. The Lord is also angry with me for your sake, saying, even you shall not go up there. And we see that Moses had this one anger incident. And I've thought to myself, God, he's only human. But God says basically, he wants you to always have faith. And the more he has faith, the more he can bless you either in this age as well as in the age to come. Then verse 38, Joshua the son of Nun who stands before you, he'll go in there. Encourage him because he'll cause Israel to inherit it. Moreover, your little ones and your children who say will be victims, who today have no knowledge of good and evil, they're going to go in there and I'm going to give it to them and they're going to possess it. For as for you, turn, take your journey into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. Then he answered and said, we sinned against you. Well, that's the Lord. And we're going to go off and fight. Just as the Lord our God commanded us. And every one of you gird up your weapon and you went up to the mountain. And the Lord said to me, tell them, don't go up and fight. I'm not among you. You're going to be defeated. See, God didn't do it the way they wanted it. So they decided to do it their way. Laodicea means their way, deciding their way. They don't want to do it God's way. They think they know a better way. So I spoke to you, yet you would not listen. You rebelled against the command of the Lord and presumptuously went up the mountains. And the Amorites who dwell in the mountain came down against you and chased you down and drove you back from Seir down to Hormah. Then you returned and wept before the Lord, but the Lord wouldn't listen to you or voice or give ear to you. So you remained in Kadesh many days, according to the days you spent there. Now we'll go to chapter 2. Then we turned and journeyed into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea, as the Lord spoke to me, and we skirted Mount Seir for many days. The Lord said to me, you skirted this mountain long enough, turn northward. So God, I'm going to go through this, but God made him to go through all kinds of ways. With your personal background, this might not be the right word to use, but I'm going to use it, and I hope it's not offensive. You've got baggage. I'm not talking about relationship baggage here. I'm talking about you've gone through some stuff, how you're raised, mistakes you made. And because of that, your way of skirting around, God's going to have it a little bit different than his, hers, or his. Okay, but back then he had them all skirt around for a long way. Verse 4, and he commanded people, saying, you're about to pass the territory of the brethren, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. They'll be afraid of you. Watch yourselves carefully. Don't meddle with them. I'm not going to give you any of their land, not so much as one footstep. I've given this to Mount Seir, to Esau for possession. You can buy food from them and with money, and you can eat. You can also buy water from them so you can drink. For the Lord has blessed you in all the work in your hands. And he knows you're trudging through the great wilderness. God knows you're trudging or you're enduring now. These 40 years the Lord has been with you, and you've lacked nothing. We passed by the way, they lacked nothing. They did not have cell phones. They didn't have air conditioning. They didn't have computer access. They didn't have online orders. A bunch of other things, by the way. God said you had what you needed. We passed beyond our brethren, descendants of Esau, dwelled in Seir, away from the road of the plain, away from Elis and Ezion-Geber. We turned and passed the way of the wilderness of Moab. The Lord said to me, do not harass Moab, nor contend with them in battle, for I will not give you any of their land for possession, because I've given Ar to the descendants of Lot as a possession. And by the way, I mentioned the place of, in the wilderness place of safety, the protection. It will probably be in the land of Moab. We don't know for sure, but when you look at all the places in the Bible where it says it can't be the north, can't be to the west, can't be at the coast, can't be straight south. The only place left is southeast. When I put all those things in the Bible I could find together on it, which points in that general area. Verse 10. The Enom dwelt there at times past, people as great and numerous, and tall as Anakim. Now God's saying, look, there was actually bigger, taller people over there, and they're not there anymore. God's trying to say, look, I can do anything, okay? We made bigger armies before than that. And it forgot, by the way, Egypt had like the most powerful army in the world at the time. It's possible that China's army might have been comparable, maybe, but most likely the Egyptian army was the most powerful one in the world, and God destroyed it without the Israelites throwing a spear. Anyway, they're regarded as giants, like the Anakim, but the Moabites call them Eman. The Horites formerly dwelt in Seir, but their descendants of Esau dispossessed them and destroyed their places. God can push out the sin in your life if you'll stay with him. You might say, but it's really bad sin, and that's what he's saying here. These people are really bad. There were even worse ones before that I pushed out. Don't think your sin is so bad that can't forgive you or help you overcome either. And dwelt in their places as Israel did in the land of their possession, which the Lord gave them. Now rise and cross over to the valley of Zered, so we crossed over the valley of Zered. Oh, at least they listened this time. The time we took to come from Kadesh Barnea till we crossed over the valley of Zered was 38 years. And they could have done it in a couple of months, except God wouldn't let them. And the generation of men of war was consumed in the midst of the camp, just as the Lord had sworn to them. For indeed, the hand of the Lord was against them to destroy them from the midst of the camp until they were consumed. You don't want to be one of the ones that God says, we have to destroy them. They can't go to be protected in a place. Now, by the way, if you end up being martyred because you're giving a witness, don't think that God doesn't love you, okay? Because we do know that will happen. But if you're going to be killed for something, be killed for the right reason, okay? For the truth, not because you hid and somebody found you and killed you, because that's what's going to happen to the bulk of the Laodiceans. So it was, and all the men of war had finally perished among the people. The Lord spoke to me saying, this day you're going to cross over. Okay, finally, when the last are the people who said, you've just brought us here to die. Nope. Well, we're going to let you die since that's what you wanted. After that was done, they went over. Verse 19. When you come near the people of Ammon, do not harass or meddle with them, for I'm not going to give them into their land, the people of Ammon, for the possession, because I have given it to the descendants of Lot as their possession. That was also regarded as the land of the giants, formerly dwelt there. But the Ammonites called them Zamzumim. So apparently there are all kinds of really tall, big, powerful people there. Now in modern warfare, that doesn't matter. They have things called guns and bombs, and it doesn't matter how tall somebody is. But back then, you're going to fight them hand to hand. Somebody bigger's got more muscle. Okay? They can wield a bigger spear. You can throw him farther. Get you farther with a sword. Okay? It's like, you can't beat this. God said, look, now we got rid of all the bigger ones, and the other big ones, and the other big ones. All the big threats. And in your life, you've got some, as you work to overcome sin, you know there's something really, really big. They can be overcome. And by the way, we have 2 booklets. I don't know if they're in the back or not, if you don't have them. One's prayer, what does the Bible teach? And the other is on faith, for those God has called and chosen. And those of you watching this online, those are available at the www.ccog.org website, ccog.org. Go to the literature tab under books and booklets and you can find those. Okay, let's see here. And then these, verse 22, just as he did for the descendants of Esau, dwelt in Seir, destroyed the Horites before them, they dispossessed them and dwelt in their place even today. So God's saying, these other people I pushed out for other people. And the Avim, who dwelt in the villages as far as Gaza, and the Caphtorim, who came from Caphtor, destroyed them and dwelt in their place. Rise, take your journey and cross the river Arnon. Look, I've given into your hand Sihon and Amorite, the king of Heshbon, and the land of Begin, to possess it and engage him in battle. This day I will begin to put the dread out and the fear of you among the nations, whole heaven. They'll hear the report of you, and shall tremble and be in anguish because of you. During the time the church is going to be protected in the wilderness, they will not be able to destroy those who are protected. How's God going to do it? I'm not quite sure, but this passage in verse 25 says God did something before, and he'll do it again. So God has a plan to protect those who will be protected. Even though the world is going to look, no, we can't possibly win. They could get us with bombs or whatever other things. God's got a plan. He had a plan for them. It worked out for them. They were scared. God had a plan, still has a plan for us. And I sent messengers from the wilderness to Kedemoth, to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, with the words of peace, saying, let me pass your land. We'll keep strictly on the road. I won't go to the right, I won't go to the left. Just sell me food for money, that I may eat, and water for money, that I may drink. Only let me pass through on foot. Just as the descendants of Esau, who dwelt in Seir and Moab, did for me, till I crossed to the Jordan, which God's giving us. But Sihon, the king of Heshbon, would not let them pass through. Why would I believe your God? He probably said. God hardened his spirit, made his heart obstinate, he might deliver him in your hands, as is this day. And the Lord said to me, see, I've begun to give Sihon and his land over to you. Begin to possess it, and you might inherit it. And Sihon and all the people came out to fight us at Jahaz. The Lord our God delivered them over to us, and we defeated him, his sons and his people. We took all the cities at that time, and we utterly destroyed the men, women, and little ones of them. We left nothing of it remaining. We took only the livestock as plunder for ourselves, and the spoil of the cities which we took. So they could have gotten off cheap. These people got destroyed. They could have actually gotten paid. But no, they decided they had a better way. And they got destroyed and lost everything they had. We've got to do it God's way. There's no other way to do it. From Eror, which is on the bank of the river Arnon, from the city that is in ravine as far as Gilead, there was not one city too strong for us. The Lord our God delivered to us. There's no sin that you can't repent of. Because if you've committed the unpardonable sin, you don't want to repent. Verse 37, only did not go near the land of the people of Ammon, anywhere around the river Jabbok, to the cities and mountains, wherever the Lord our God had forbidden us. Now we'll go to chapter 3. And then we went up the road to Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us and all his people to battle at Indriel. So notice they keep having problems. Okay, understand, if people are coming out to fight you, they want to kill you and take everything that you've got. Okay, now these people don't have that much faith, and even those who had some faith are probably scared a lot. We got to go through tests and trials that we don't like. Okay, yes. Well, God delivered them. Yes, but you realize when things are happening, the book hadn't been written. They were told this was going to happen, but they didn't believe God anyway. And we go through stuff now. It wouldn't surprise me, and this is the position of the old Worldwide Church of God, that perhaps some of what's going on now will be written in the extension of the book of Acts. I don't know if that'll be. People will read that. You see, people got through it, but when you're going through it, it's like, what's it really going to do? Remember, for example, with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the book of Daniel, they didn't know what was going to happen. They were thrown in the fiery furnace. They said, God could save us, but if not, we still are going to worship you. Now, never in history did we know of any time 3 guys were thrown in a burning fire like that didn't burn up. They didn't know. You said, yes, but they were men of faith. Yeah, well, the men of faith got their heads cut off and chopped up. You read about that in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. Anyway, in verse 2 here of chapter 3, and the Lord said, don't fear them, for I've delivered them, and all his people in your hand, as you did to Sihon. He delivered all of us there. And we went and took his cities that time. There was not a city we didn't take. 60 cities, the region of Argob. And all these cities were fortified with high walls, gates, bars, and had a great many rural towns. They had everything. You know what's going to happen to us? I shouldn't say this, but you already know it probably. They're going to have computers all over the place. They're going to have biometric, all kinds of nonsense stuff all over the place. They got it. We're going to say, wow, we can't possibly do what we're supposed to do. The 2 witnesses possibly go out and do it. Yes, it's going to happen. Okay? But back then, people were like, wait, you can't beat a place with all those walls and gates. Why do you think they built them? They know this works. Not against God, it didn't work. Same thing with other stuff, with facial recognition. And then I'm absolutely convinced they're going to make phony videos of people like us, make it sound like someone like myself saying stuff I don't say, and trash like that. That stuff's going to happen. The Bible warns, used from the old King James, that deceivers are going to wax worse and worse. And they're coming up with the technology to do it. Don't think that they won't do it. Anyway, we need to have faith. And we utterly destroyed them, as we did Sihon, the king of Heshbon. Others destroyed the men, women, and children of every city. But all the livestock and the spoil of the cities we took as booty for ourselves. Most of you are not in the agricultural world. Cattle's worth lots and lots and lots and lots of money. I don't know the exact price, but somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 a head in U.S. dollars. Okay? These people fought them, they lost, and made the Israelites wealthy. Verse 8, at that time we took from the hand of the 2 kings of the Amorites who were on this side of the Jordan, and from River Arnon and Mount Hermon, the Sidonians, called Hermon Sirion, and the Amorites, who call it Sinir, all the cities of the plain, all Gilead, all Bashan, as far as Saka, Edrei, kingdoms of Gog and Bashan, for only the king, Og, king of Bashan, remained, the remnant of the giants. Indeed, his bedstand was of an iron bedstand. It is not in Ramoth, the people of Ammon. 9 cubits is its length, and 4 cubits is its width, according to the standard cubit. Now, a cubit's supposed to be about this long. Okay? 9 of them. I don't know how big the guy was, but this suggests he could be up to like 14 feet. Maybe he's only 10 feet or 9 feet, but anyway. Verse 12. In this land which we possessed at the time from Arior, which is by the river Arnon, and half the mountain of Gilead and the cities I gave to the Reubenites and to the Gadites. The rest of Gilead and Bashan and the kingdom of Og I gave half the tribe of Manasseh. All the region of Argob and all Bashan was called the land of the giants. So we keep reading about this land of the giants. This is why they were afraid. Bigger people, best technology. They were scared. They're walking by sight, not faith. Verse 14, Jared, the son of Manasseh, took all the region of Argob, as far as the border of Gershurites and the Maacathites, and called Bashan after his own name, Havoth Jair, to this day. I also gave Gilead to Maker, and to the Reubenites and the Gadites, I gave from Gilead as far as the river Arnon, middle of the river, the border as far as the river Jabbok, the borders of the people of Ammon, the plain also with Jordan as its border, from Shinnereth as far as the east side of the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, below the slopes of Pisgah. Then I commanded you at that time, saying, the Lord your God has given you this land to possess. By the way, I always have to look down when I'm looking at their names because I can't. I got to see them and say them here. All you men of valor shall cross over armed with your brethren, the children of Israel, but your wives and your little ones, livestock, I know you have much livestock, shall stay in the cities which I've given you. So what had happened is 2.5 of the tribes stayed on one side of the Jordan, the others went over. But the tribes that stayed over, they sent their warriors over to possess the other. Anyway, verse 20, until the Lord has given rest to your brethren as to you, and they shall also possess the land which the Lord is giving them beyond the Jordan. Then each of you may return to his possession, which I have given you. And I commanded Joshua at that time, saying, your eyes have seen all that the Lord your God has done to these 2 kings. So God, the Lord, will do to those in the kingdom you're going to pass. You shall not fear them, for the Lord your God himself will fight for you. And these were frightful people they were fighting. Verse 23. Then I pleaded with the Lord at that time, saying, O Lord, you've begun to show your servant your greatness and your mighty hand. For what God is there in heaven or on earth who can do anything like your works and your mighty deeds? So Moses recognized what God was doing. I pray, let me cross over to see the good land behind the Jordan and the pleasant mountains. Remember, because for 40 years Moses was telling me about the promised land. He tried to like to see it. The Lord was angry at me at your account. You wouldn't listen to me. So the Lord said to me, enough of that. Speak to me no more on this account. However, it says you can go up to the top of Pisgah, and lift up your eyes toward the east, the north, the south, and the west. And behold with your eyes, for you're not going to cross over the Jordan. So God said, we're not going to let you see it all, but you can see some of it. And he'd already been to part of it, because you look, if you are on a mountain, you look north, south, east, and west, you had to see somewhere you'd already been. Okay, but the other side, God said he couldn't go. But command Joshua and encourage him and strengthen him. You all are, in a sense, a type of Joshua that you need to encourage and strengthen in your life. And he shall go over before this people, and shall cause them to inherit the land which you will see. So we stayed in the valley opposite Beth Peor. And by the way, chapter 4 will be the last chapter I plan on covering today. Now, O Israel, hear the statutes and the judgments which I will teach you to observe. See, I decided not to skip the first 3 chapters, start to get into those. Because it said the book of the law, and as far as I can tell, we should do all of it. Reminds me, there's a story, it's in Judges, I think, and I should have looked it up, where one of the prophets tells the guy, take some arrows and shoot. So the guy takes the arrows and shoots a few times, and he stops. The prophet gets mad. You should have shot more arrows, because now you're only going to be able to win so many times. Well, so I read this and said, well, I know it talks about the statutes, but it says this book of the law, so why skip the first few parts? So that's one of the reasons why we covered the first few chapters. We'll cover, again, God willing, the entire book. But not today, just through chapter 4, verse 1. Now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the judgments which I will teach you to observe, that you may live. These statutes were to make it so you could live better. And a lot of these things are what we're going to be seeing and teaching during the millennium. Go in and possess the land which the Lord your God gives your fathers is giving you. And you're not to add to the word which I command you. That doesn't mean you can't explain it. Okay, just what the Bible talked about. happened in Nehemiah's time. Nehemiah 8, they read the law and they explained it so the people to understand it. And I also read something similar about that in Deuteronomy 31 earlier today. But we don't add words of God that aren't words of God. That you may keep the commandment of the Lord your God, which I command you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did in Baal Peor. The Lord your God has destroyed from among you all the men who followed Baal of Peor. But you, who've held fast to the Lord your God, you're alive today, every one of you. Now, we haven't had people going out to be murdered for the kingdom of God yet. But such things will happen. Surely I've taught you statutes and judgments, just as the Lord your God has commanded me, that you should act according to them in the land which you go to possess. Therefore, be careful to observe them. Even if you're called a radical or an extremist or some fringe group. Okay. Let me step back. Hold on. Verse 6. Be careful to observe them. The sight, surely. Oh, okay. This is your wisdom and your understanding, the sight of the peoples who hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has a God so near as the Lord our God is to us, and whatever reason we may call upon him. When we're in the millennial kingdom of God, people are going to say, we really should have done it this way. What is the way? And you're going to help teach them. Till the descendants of Israel were supposed to be an example, so the world will say, well, look, that's the way we should be doing everything. But they didn't, so people didn't follow them. Verse 8, what great nation is there that has such statutes and righteous judgments as are in all this law which I set before you this day? In Eliot's commentary, it's a Protestant commentary, it says that at the Feast of Tabernacles, it was understanding every 7 years they're supposed to read the Book of Deuteronomy. But I don't think that particular group, that the people behind that, did that. I have no reason to believe they actually kept it. But they knew it was supposed to be done. Verse 9, only take heed to yourselves and diligently keep yourselves, lest you forget the things your eyes have seen, lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life. And in this case, one of the reasons we're supposed to do this every 7 years. And teach them to your children and your grandchildren, especially concerning the day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, when the Lord said to me, gather the people to me, and I will let them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days they live on the earth, that they may teach their children. So yes, your children are supposed to be learning too. Then you came near and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire in the midst of the heavens, with darkness, with clouds, and with thick darkness. And the Lord spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the sound of the words, but saw no form. You only heard a voice. So he declared to you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform. The 10 Commandments, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. The Lord commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments, that you may observe them in the land which you cross over to possess. Take heed to yourselves, if you saw no form when the Lord spoke to you at Horeb in the midst of the fire, lest you add corruptly and make for yourselves any carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that's on the earth, and the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the air, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, any fish that's in the water or beneath the earth. Now let me just stop there. The Eastern Orthodox say, because Jesus came, this means it's okay to make pictures and icons and stuff. So the fact that God was actually here, that means it doesn't count anymore. Now, there's no record in early Christianity, including of those the Eastern Orthodox consider saints, that people had pictures of Jesus and were carrying them around and venerating him and kneeling before them or anything like that. Partially based upon this scripture, but more than just that. But they say, oh, that changed it. We don't have any record of early Christians teaching that, by the way. But that church says they're the Orthodox, and they've never changed. But they have. We've got a book coming out that'll talk about some of that later as well. Verse 19. And take heed lest you lift your eyes to the heavens. You see the sun, the moon, the stars, the host of heavens. Wow, that's big. Going to kind of the giant idea, the really giant stuff, right? You feel driven to worship them and serve them. Why might they do it? Weather, hurricanes, tornadoes, whatever. Wow, there's great power up in the sky someplace. You're not supposed to worship and serve them, which the Lord your God has given to all the peoples under heaven as a heritage of the heavens, but not to worship them. But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be his people, inheritance for you this day. God has brought you out of spiritual Egypt to be called in this age. Furthermore, the Lord was angry with me for your sakes and swore that I would not cross over the Jordan, that I wouldn't enter the good land which the Lord your God has given you as an inheritance. But I must die in this land, and I must not cross over the Jordan, but you are to cross over and possess the good land. Take heed to yourselves, lest you forget the covenant the Lord your God made with you, and make yourselves a carved image, form of anything which the Lord your God has forbidden you. My wife and I have been to many Greco-Roman churches, and they're filled with these things. By the way, the reality is the Roman Catholics basically accepted this stuff from the Greek Orthodox originally, because the Roman Catholics were not into it as much as a lot of people think. They thought it was the other way around. The Roman Catholics gave it their rails. Now, the Eastern Orthodox really pushed it, and the Roman Catholics ended up accepting it. There were some of the Romans who had, don't get me wrong, but they still have some hesitancy. Anyway, verse 24, for the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. So don't think it's okay to do this wrong thing, because God won't care. Well, God does care. When you beget children and grandchildren and grown old in the land, and act corruptly, and make a carved image in the form of anything, and do evil in the sight of the Lord your God, and provoke him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that you will soon utterly perish from the land which you possess. You cross over the Jordan to possess. You won't prolong your days on it, but you'll be utterly destroyed. And we know the children of Israel were pulled out by the Babylonian captivity. Verse 27, the Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and you'll be left few in number among the nations where the Lord will drive you. And there you will serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear nor eat or smell. But from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find, if you find them, if you'll seek him with your heart and with your soul. It's not just a partial thing, like, okay, I'm going to kind of, yeah, God, yeah, there's one, okay. And I'll say hello to you once every now and then. When you're in distress, and all these things come upon you in the latter days, when you turn to the Lord your God and obey his voice, for the Lord your God is a merciful God, he will not forsake you nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers which he swore to them. Verse 32. For ask now concerning the days that are past, which were before you, and since the day that God created man on earth, and ask from one end of the heaven to the other, whether any good thing like this has ever happened, or anything like this ever been heard. Did any people ever hear the voice of God speaking out in the midst of the fire as you have heard and lived? Or did God ever try to go and take for himself a nation from the midst of any other, by the trials and signs and wonders, by war, by mighty hand and outstretched arm, great terrors, according to all the Lord your God did for you in the land Egypt for your eyes? So God's saying, look, we didn't do this with physical Israel. Don't you see? This is unique. And for us, we get to be called in this age. A unique age in some ways is way easier physically. I can hear an air conditioner running right now. They didn't have that back then. To you was shown that you might know that the Lord himself is God, and there's no other besides him out of heaven. He let you hear his voice, that he might instruct you on the earth. He showed his great fire, and heard his words out of the midst of the fire. You say, but I didn't get to actually hear the words. Remember what Jesus said to Thomas? Thomas, you only believe because you saw. Blessed are those who didn't see and believe. That would be us. Okay? And God has done things in your life that you should believe as well. Verse 37, because the Lord loved your fathers, therefore he chose his descendants after them. And he brought you out of Egypt in his presence with his mighty power, driving out from before you nations greater and mightier than you, getting you past Satan's sway from his world, to bring you in and to give you their land as inheritance in his day. Eye has not seen how great it's going to be for you after things have been you've been resurrected. Way beyond what the children of Israel got with that promised land. Verse 39. Therefore know this day, and consider it in your hearts, that the Lord himself is God in heaven above and the earth beneath, and there is no other. No matter how they may try to track us or do various other things, censor us. Verse 40. You shall therefore keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command you today, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which the Lord your God has given you for all time. Well, we're in this land now, but God's going to give another land later. Verse 41. Then Moses set apart 3 cities on this side of the Jordan against the rising of the sun, that the manslayer might flee, whom kills his neighbor unintentionally without having hated him in times past. By fleeing to one of these cities, he might live. And he mentions it called Bezer in the wilderness, in the plateau of the Reubenites, Ramoth and Gilead, the Gadites, and Golan and Bashan for the Manassites, is what it says. Now, let me explain this for a moment. In old days, we didn't have 18,747,912 regulations for every single thing they could come up with. There weren't volumes and volumes of laws that people were violating every day. They didn't need those kind of safety laws. They had a couple of them. One is, if you accidentally kill somebody, you're done. It doesn't matter how you accidentally did it. If we think you might have done it on purpose, we're going to kill you. But if you did it by accident, you're done. We don't care where you grew up. You got to go to this other place. We're not going to give you anything. We're not going to put you in jail. We're not going to feed you. We're not going to house you. You flee and you stay there until the high priest dies. And if he's a young guy, you may be there your whole life. There's no welfare. There's no government handouts. You're going to live that way. You've got to lose. You're done. You go back, get your stuff, they'll kill you. You can do nothing. You don't think this had an effect on safety? People might have paid some attention, make sure they didn't accidentally kill people. Like in our days, maybe some people are not so hesitant to drink too much so they go out and drive. Oh, in California, they give you big fines unless you go to jail for 3 or 4 days, sometimes a week or 2. You get over that. You don't get over losing everything you've got. You might think more than twice before you do something that's dangerous for everybody else. They didn't need all those rules and regulations. We've got them now because we wouldn't do something this harsh. It's not fair. But God said, no, you will love your neighbor as yourself. It says that in the book of Leviticus. And this means you don't kill him or her, including by accident. You had to be careful. So anyway, just a commentary on our modern society. We've got all these rules and stuff. Verse 44. Now this is the law which Moses set before the children of Israel. These are the testimonies, the statutes, and the judgments which Moses spoke to the children of Israel after they came out of Egypt on this side of Jordan. Well, most of you have been called out of Egypt and you're here. So we're intending to go through them while you're here. In the valley opposite of Beth Peor, in the land of Sihon, of the Amorites who dwelled at Heshbon, whom Moses and the children of Israel defeated after they came out of Egypt. And they took possession of his land and the land of Og of Bashan, 2 kings of the Amorites who were on this side of the Jordan, toward the rising sun, and Aor, which is on the banks of the river Arnon, even to Mount Sion, that is Hermon, and all the plain on the east side of the Jordan, as far as the sea of Arabah, below the slopes of Pisgah. This is supposed to be done, reading this book of law, every 7 years. It's Feast of Tabernacles. And that's what we intend to do. Hopefully I brought up some things in the Book of Deuteronomy that you haven't considered, and hopefully will bring you more, so you'll know that you can trust this word, trust God's promises to you, learn his ways, so you can fear God always, but also to teach your children, teach others, so God can use you to be kings and priests in his coming kingdom. This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Continuing Church of God.